The mysterious case of Abraham Lincoln's remarkable defense before becoming president. William Duff was almost certain to be sentenced to death, but lawyer Abraham Lincoln, with his keen and persuasive arguments, changed everything, as if he was hypnotizing the audience. In the early 1830s, New Salem, a bustling town with a population of about 100 people, was situated along the Sangamon River in the state of Illinois. One morning in July 1831, a slim young man with deep-set eyes entered New Salem, wearing a tattered coat and a straw hat. Little did anyone know that the young man who had left home with not a penny to his name would later become the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln.
During his early days of hardship and throughout his time in Salem, Lincoln was always welcomed at the modest wooden home of Hannah and Jack Armstrong. Every couple of days, Lincoln would come there to eat, chat, spend the night, watch over Hannah's children, and help Jack with chopping firewood.
As the years passed by gently, Lincoln was elected to the Legislative Assembly and began practicing law. Hannah and Jack Armstrong remained in the town, and William Duff Armstrong, their son, grew up to be a strong, kind-hearted, and adventurous young man. On the night of August 29, 1857, during a camping trip, William, in a drunken state, was lying on the ground when James P. Metzger, also intoxicated, playfully grabbed his ankle and pulled him. In his dazed state, William woke up and fiercely retaliated. After a few blows, the two separated when Metzger got into a fight with Norris, another intoxicated man. Later, the three reconciled, had a few more drinks together, and Metzger rode his horse back home. 3 days later, he was found dead, with the cause of death attributed to 2 large bruises, his head and right eye. William and Norris were arrested and charged with murder. This was a painful experience for William's parents. His frail father fell ill and passed away shortly thereafter, instructing his wife to save money to defend their son. At this time, Lincoln had left New Salem, got married, become busy with his new career, been elected to Congress, and become one of the most prominent and influential lawyers in the state of Illinois. Upon hearing about the tragedy that had befallen the family in September 18, 1857, Lincoln wrote a letter to Hannah, offering to defend her son free of charge. During Norris's trial in May 1858, he confessed that both he and William had attacked Metzger, but it was William who caused the fatal blows. Norris was subsequently sentenced to 8 years in prison. Lawyer Lincoln carefully examined the testimonies presented during Norris's trial and discovered evidence contradicting his client's involvement. A man named Allen, who had claimed to witness William attacking Metzger with a rubber gun, provided false testimony against his own client. Lincoln smiled when reading those lines. On May 7, 1858, the public flocked to witness William's trial, largely due to the reputation of lawyer Lincoln. Witness Allen was called to the stand and passionately testified that the accused had indeed attacked Metzger with a large rubber gun. "The moon was so bright that night that I could clearly see everything that happened," Allen asserted. He believed that Norris had assisted in the attack, but William was the true murderer. The courtroom fell silent, and the jurors leaned back in their seats as if the case had concluded. The audience nodded and whispered to each other that William's execution was imminent. The prosecutor looked at the defense lawyer with a challenging expression. With calm composure, Lincoln stepped forward, inviting the witness to return and recount every detail. What kind of weapon did William use? Which hand did he hold? Where on the victim's head did he strike? What was the defendant wearing that night? The witness began to falter, revealing that it was around p.m. at the time, and he was standing about 50 meters away from the brawl. "I only remember that the moon was full and very bright, almost like daytime," Allen insisted about the moonlight detail. When he finished, Lincoln suddenly pulled out the 1857 almanac from his pocket and pointed his long index finger to August 29, the night of the murder. He handed it to the witness and asked him to speak loudly for the jury to hear, in which phase was the moon on that night, according to the calendar. The courtroom fell silent once again as Allen read the details in the almanac. The moon was almost entirely in a waning phase that night. The witness could barely see beyond 5 meters, let alone 50 meters. The dramatic confrontation led to an immediate adjournment of the trial. However, the prosecutors were not easily deterred and attempted to find additional witnesses, even though none of them had directly witnessed the incident. They turned their focus to criticizing William and his companions, referring to them as bandits and fervently demanding the death penalty. All eyes turned to Lincoln and his familiar and steel-edged defenses. In the many cases that the public had witnessed before, still displaying a composed demeanor, Lincoln took off his coat, stepped up to the podium, and looked down at the crowded room. "Firstly, I want to emphasize that I am not accepting any payment for this defense," he said, deliberately glancing at the state special prosecutor, who was clearly the highest paid individual in the case. Lincoln shifted his tone, recounting the 6 years he had been embraced by William's family, humble but virtuous and heroic farmers whom everyone knew, unworthy of being called bandits. Then, in a short span of time, the lawyer continued to discuss the fabricated evidence in the case. Those who witnessed Lincoln's performance later recounted it with admiration. His arguments were like a mesmerizing spell, both resolute and full of emotion. As Lincoln sat back down, many jurors were moved to tears. Hannah, the elderly mother, quietly wept. During the break, Lincoln sat next to Hannah, assuring her, "They will acquit William before nightfall." Overwhelmed with anticipation, the mother couldn't bear the pressure and rushed outside, gasping for air under a tree. Upon hearing the bell announcing the verdict, she gasped and ran to the courthouse, meeting Lincoln on the steps. He smiled, but had tears in his eyes, pointing jokingly to the west. "William is free now, and the sun has not yet set." In November 1860, Lincoln was elected as the 16th President of the United States, renowned for the Emancipation Proclamation, which paved the way for the abolition of slavery. He was assassinated at Ford's Theater in Washington on April 14, 1865. His casket was placed on a train, traveling through 180 cities in 7 states, allowing mourners to pay their respects to the president. Lincoln is honored as a national hero, sacrificing for the freedom of humanity. He is regarded as one of the 4 greatest presidents in history, alongside George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Theodore Roosevelt, with his likeness carved on Mount Rushmore.